In this video, I'm going to answer the most common questions that I get from my viewers about making cabinets, as well as sharing my favorite tips and tricks for the process and showing you the tools that I find most helpful and least helpful. So let's get started. All right, so the first question, and this is by far the most common question I get, goes something like this. What plywood are you using? Does that plywood already have finish on it? What plywood is that? It looks shiny. And the answer is yes. I build all my cabinets out of pre-finished maple or birch plywood. Sometimes it's called UV coated plywood. And I don't know if that means that the coating protects it from UV light or if they use UV light to cure the coating. Who knows? I source mine at my local plywood distributor, Nashville Plywood Company.
Oh, that's real creative.
So you can make cabinets from pretty much any available sheet goods, particle board, MDF, plywood, whatever. They go up in price and quality in that order. But getting your plywood pre-finished is like the cherry on top of what is already a nice product to work with. It's more expensive, as you might imagine. It goes for $20 to $25 more per sheet. But oh my, the trade-off is no sanding and no finishing, unless you're painting it, which I'll talk more about that in a minute. Basically, once you've built your cabinet, the cabinet is done. Usually finish sanding and then finishing your cabinets is going to be a couple days more work, and that's hours and hours of labor saved when you multiply it out across a whole set of cabinets. And you may ask, well, if I'm going to be painting my cabinets, why would I pay extra for pre-finish? Well, you can still prime and paint this plywood, and one benefit to doing that is it's not going to have any grain raising and you're not going to have any grain show through on the finished piece. It's going to leave a nice glass smooth finish because the plywood already has a nice glass smooth finish already on it from the start. Also, I try to build all my drawer boxes out of 5/8 inch Baltic birch plywood for low visibility areas like built-ins, laundry rooms, and workshops. And for high visibility areas like kitchens and pantries, I build my drawer boxes out of hard maple. I also use hard maple for all my face frames because it's a very tight-grained wood that paints real well. And it's also very dense, so it's going to be durable and stand up to a lot of beating that it's going to take over time. All right, so now you know the secret of the shiny plywood. It's time to throw a quick tip your way, and this has to do with how I install drawer slides to make sure that they're all the right height and they match on both sides. No matter if you use side mount slides or under mount slides, there are a lot of jigs that you can buy that are going to help you with this installation process, but for the most part they work by using a hand or a clamp to hold a jig in place, and they rely on you marking reference lines on the side of the cabinet accurately on both sides and hitting that mark. I think there's an easier way, and you probably already have what you need to do it. Since you are building cabinets, there's a pretty good chance that you've already got an offcut or scrap laying around that's tall enough to serve this purpose. First, trim the plywood to the height of your highest set of slides. Now set that inside the cabinet like this and install one slide. Then just pop it over to the other side and install that one. Then you can just trim that spacer down to the height of the next set of slides and repeat that process until you reach the bottom. Using positive references like a plywood scrap guarantees you that the slides are going to be the exact same height no matter what. Hey, and the best part is you used a scrap of plywood that you otherwise would have just squirreled away in your offcut pile because one day you might make something from it. One thing that can make cabinet building so much easier is having the right tools on hand, and so I want to share with you a tool that I always use in this process. Well, it's not so much a tool as it is a secret weapon. This is a roll of two-sided tape, and I use this on all kinds of projects in the shop, and I don't always talk about it on camera, but trust me, it's there in the background helping me out. Do you want to stick a spacer jig to the underside of your cabinet? Two-sided tape. And a lot of times those drawer slide spacers want to fall over when I'm trying to install the slides. Yep, two-sided tape. And there are so many other circumstances around the shop where I need a temporary but secure hold on something like a second set of hands while I focus on the important task. It was so useful when I was making this bit storage tray for my router table. I could literally just stick the slides exactly in place and then install each side and guarantee that the slides would go back together after I was done. There are a lot of brands of two-sided tape, but the one that I've found to be the best is from Spec Tape. It's got a really strong hold, sometimes so strong that you've actually got to pry your work apart to break the bond. So another very popular question I get from you guys is, how the heck do you know what size to make your cabinets? And the snarky answer to that is, well, you can make them whatever size you need them to be, which if you're doing built-ins or a custom space that you need to fill with cabinets is actually true. But if you're doing something like planning out a kitchen or pantry, then you want to build your cabinets to a specific set of sizes, and the good news is there are standards for that sort of thing. There are, of course, books that are going to lay all this out, and one of my favorites is this Cabinet Maker's Reference. But a quick Google search is going to do the trick as well. Cabinet size standards. And why these standards exist is because there are whole other industries out there that count on there being a standard so that they can make things like dishwashers and ovens. This makes sure that everything goes together properly when you build out your kitchen. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but here are the standards for the most common cabinet types. For base cabinets, your two most important dimensions are height and depth, which are almost always 34.5 inches and 24 inches respectively. 21 inches is another common cabinet depth, but that's generally for bathroom vanities, not kitchens. Oh, and a quick disclaimer, all of these are American standards in inches because I'm an American and I don't know anything else. Okay, for the width, you get a little bit more freedom because there are a lot of standard sizes between 12 and 42 inches, the most common sizes being 24, 30, and 36. And you'll notice that they tend to go in increments of 3 inches. For upper cabinets, your heights have a pretty wide range, the most common being 24, 30, 36, and 42. For depth, it's a little more limited. The most common depth is 12 inches and 24 inches for those cabinets that tend to hang over the refrigerator. And the widths pretty much follow the same standards as base cabinets. And one other standard to know is that the width and height of your cabinets is measured from the outside edges of the cabinet, which if your cabinet has a face frame with overhangs on it is going to be measured from there and not from the cabinet sides. So my next tip is one that I learned over a long period of time, just saves a lot of headaches and helps your assemblies go by much smoother, and that is to measure bit heights, blade heights, and the distance from the fence using relative measurements. Here's an example of what I mean. So let's say that I wanted to cut a groove in the cabinet side to house my back panel, and I wanted to make that groove sit just in front of the nailers. Then I can just use the nailer itself to set the distance to the fence and not use a ruler or a setup block, which may lead to a less than ideal fit. Since plywoods are never really the exact same thickness from piece to piece, it pays to use the actual part that's going to go inside the finished cabinet to take this measurement. Doing it this way, you're always going to get a nice, perfect, and flush joint with no gaps. And the same goes for drawer bottoms as well. You can just sneak up on that until you get the perfect fitting joint. Next, I want to share with you one of my favorite tricks for building cabinets, and that's my method for installing drawer fronts. Anytime I'm building a cabinet with a bank of drawers, this is what I do to get them on quickly and easily. So once I have my drawer fronts made, I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill the holes where the pull hardware is going to go. This will be really important soon. Then I head to the bottom of the cabinet, and I like to make a quick jig that I stick on the bottom with two-sided tape like thus. This is going to act like a ledge. Then I can set the front in place and make sure it's nice and centered. I'm going to fasten the front to the drawer using 2 screws that go through those holes. There's no need for spring clamps or hand-eye coordination. And now I'm free to open the cabinet and fasten it from the inside with screws. Then I just remove those screws from the front and drill my holes all the way through, and then I can add my hardware. And now that front becomes the ledge that the next one is going to sit on, but you do have to account for the small gap between the drawers, and to do that I usually like to use a 1/8 inch strip of hard maple that I made special for this process, and it works perfectly. I lay one down and then add the next front, and then I use another spacer as a straight edge on the side to ensure that they're lined up vertically. Then I can just repeat that whole process over and over again until I'm done. So if that's the first time you've ever seen that process, you're probably like me and like mind blown, and now every time I install drawer fronts, I've got to use that method. In that tip, you saw me use this jig. This is the True Position cabinet hardware jig, and I use this on every single cabinet project that I do that has pulls on it. I love this jig because once you have it all set up, you can drill all the holes for your cabinet hardware really fast. It has these adjustable positive stops that allow you to position the jig in the center of the drawer front. And then with these 2 guides, you can set the exact width of your drawer pull. I don't think it could be any simpler. It also works on doors and with single knob pulls. There are a lot of versions of this jig online, but a lot of them are plastic. I think True Position makes the best one in my opinion because it's aluminum and it's also made in America if that's something that's important to your purchase. And the next question you guys typically have for me is related to cabinet construction, and do I always use pocket holes to assemble my cabinets? And the answer is, for the most part, yes. Pocket holes tend to get a bad rap and looked upon as a cheap DIY tool. However, they've been a common method for building cabinets in cabinet shops for decades. Personally, I think that cabinets, drawers, and face frames are exactly where pocket holes are meant to be used. And you can add glue to the joint if you want, but personally, I don't think it makes that big of a difference because of the in-grain to long grain connection not being very strong to begin with. And if you're using pre-finished plywood like I am, I don't think that glue is going to stick very well to that anyways. This entire bank of cabinets was built with just pocket holes, and I'm storing a ton of stuff in there. Aesthetically, you're not going to see any of the pocket holes in the finished cabinet, so the user of the cabinets is not even going to know that they're there. While it's true that you're not going to find a shop floor full of Kreg jigs, there are a lot of production level pocket hole cutters like this one from Castle, and they even make some that are floor standing models. Another option you can use is a domino, but I really think this is overkill for common cabinets and is going to be an expensive option at that. I would go ahead and save this for use in your furniture projects. The other joint I like to add to cabinets is a dado along the back and bottom of the sides to capture the back and bottom panels. I like doing this because precisely placed dados help ensure that your cabinets are square and that the bottom is at the same height from the front to back, which comes in handy when you're using the bottom of the cabinet as a reference for installing your drawer slides. Today there are a lot of options that you can go with when it comes to cutting pocket holes, and in this video so far I've showed you my old Kreg jig as well as this Castle pocket hole cutting machine, and as much as I think this thing has been a game changer when it comes to my production capabilities and efficiency, I realize that this is probably a little bit more money than the beginner is going to be willing to spend. But there are other options. Like this one that I got from Banggood. Now this is a little bit more stripped down than the Kreg jig is, but it is made all of aluminum, which the Kreg jig is plastic. And it does come with the separate little set here that gives you the mini jig as well as an assortment of pocket screws. These are the same style screws that you would use on the Kreg system as well. It's also about half the price of the Kreg. Now I went ahead and tested this one out and I'm satisfied enough with it that I'm going to go ahead and build one of those box platforms like I built for my Kreg jig, and that's just going to allow me to use this a little bit more effectively on future projects. Now for being half the price, I think this is pretty impressive. I really like the fit and finish of the machined aluminum over what the Kreg jig feels like. I also like the fact that this comes in both metric and imperial standards when it comes to setting the depth of your cut. It also has a permanent dust collection port. Well, I guess it's not permanent. You can unscrew it. But it's a fairly low profile dust collection port. So even when you take this off and take it to your work, you can still use dust collection on it, which I think that is a really nice feature of this jig as well. And the last viewer question is all about the mystery of drawer spacing. How do you figure that out? Are there rules? How do you know how big to make your cabinets? And I know all that can seem daunting at first, and there is some math involved, but there's a methodology that you can follow to get it right. And once you do it a time or two, you can almost do it in your head after that. To get started, the first thing you need to do is decide how many drawers you want in your cabinet. For this example, let's use 4. Next, measure the inside opening of your cabinet, and this one has a 29-inch opening. A good rule of thumb for spacing your drawers is to have a 1-inch gap at the top of each drawer and a 1/2-inch gap at the very bottom. So if your cabinet's going to have 4 drawers, you're going to need 4 1-inch gaps and 1 1/2-inch gap. Now, add up all those gaps and subtract it from your opening. That's going to leave us with 24.5 inches of drawer space. Okay, now it's time to make another decision. If you're going to make all your drawers equal in size, then just take that number and divide it by 4, and that means your drawer boxes are all going to be 6 1/8 inch high. Then to figure out the different heights for your drawer slides, just measure up from the bottom of the opening to the bottom of each drawer. And I always mount my drawer slides right at the very bottom of the drawer to make this calculation easy. If you want shelves in your cabinets instead of drawers, then you're probably going to want shelf pin holes to make those shelves adjustable. And to do that process, I use 2 very different tools in different situations. The first one is this shelf pin jig from Kreg, and I've had this one for I don't know how many years, a really long time. I like this jig because it has metal bushings in all of the guide holes, which I think is much better than a lot of the other jigs, which are just all plastic or even wooden. And it also comes with its own drill bit with stop collar and this indexing pin. Using it is pretty simple. The base has a reference that you can butt up against your cabinet side, and you can drill your first hole and then use that indexing pin to start your next set of holes. I find that this jig is most helpful on cabinets that are already assembled because it's nice and portable and allows you to get inside the cabinet easily. But for all my new cabinet builds, I've begun using the LR32 system from Festool. This system utilizes a router with an indexing plate that moves along this rail and locks into place at set intervals of 32 millimeters, which is an industry standard dimension. This method can create runs of shelf pin holes faster than with the Kreg version, and using a router bit instead of a drill makes a much cleaner hole. So for me, I'm always going to have this jig on hand because it's so handy and portable for existing cabinetry, and it's also just a good budget-friendly option for doing shelf pin holes. But for all of my new cabinets, I've already switched over to the LR32 system. For me, it's just so much faster and more efficient, and also drills really clean holes. All right, well, that's it. Questions answered, plus tips and tools to help you improve your cabinet making. And until next time, have fun in the shop.